Good morning. My name is John Mack. I'm publisher of the Pharma Marketing News and Pharma Marketing blog, and today I will present what I learned from a survey of my readers regarding the questions FDA asked. First, some history. I was a panel member of the 1996 public hearing on the Internet, and that meeting inspired me to co-found the Internet Healthcare Coalition, which was a nonprofit group that developed the eHealth Code of Ethics, which addresses the problem of misleading health information on the Internet. But I also have an axe to grind. On my blog, I often criticize the FDA and pharma for not aggressively correcting violations of regulations and voluntary guidelines regarding direct-to-consumer communications via the Internet. For example, I was one of the first people in 2006 to point out that the so-called one-click rule really violated FDA regulations. And also, via the Internet, I have access to a large audience of professionals who are, the majority of whom are pharmaceutical people or working for clients, are working for agencies that have pharmaceutical companies as clients. But this is also a community that I have developed or worked with over the years, and I often engage them in conversation, and some of the best conversation I've had with this community is through surveys such as the one I'll be talking about today. This survey is asked all the questions, the 19 specific questions that the FDA asked about social media, and as of November 1st, there were 354 responses, and about 80% of those respondents support the pharmaceutical industry, and 23% worked for pharmaceutical companies, and 47% worked on the agency side. So what I have to say really is that while there may not be very many pharma companies here making presentations, I think the survey that I have shows you what the rank and file of these companies are thinking. And today I'll cover accountability, fulfilling regulatory requirements, and posting corrective information. I'm going to just present an overview, and then the slides from the survey is just the background, okay? With regard to accountability, results from the survey suggested several best practices. First of all, disclosure of involvement with or influence over third-party social media content should be prominently displayed alongside relevant content when possible. Each company should have a public social media policy that includes a notice of its disclosure and other policies relating to social media. Companies should monitor social media sites for unauthorized use or modification of its approved content and make a best effort to remove or correct the content, but they should only be required to do so for sites owned or directly sponsored by them. FDA asked, how should companies disclose their involvement or influence over discussions or material, particularly discussions or material on third-party sites? And these are the choices I gave the respondents of the survey, and you can see the data maybe better when you get the printout. But what I've done here is trying to break out the results according to whether the respondents actually worked in a pharmaceutical company or worked in an agency, because sometimes they have differences of opinion. And then I compared it to all the responses. Now, obviously, this is not a scientific study, but I think the results are interesting. For example, on the public social media policy, a majority of respondents agreed that each company should have a public social media policy. Whereas FDA regulates labeling and promotion, FTC regulates unfair and deceptive trade practices. So FTC can go after companies that violate their public policies. I don't believe the FDA has that authority. And pharma, as you heard, recently suggested that the FDA and FTC redouble their enforcement efforts against fraudulent activities on the Internet. A public social media policy is a good example of how the FTC can get involved. Just a thought. Okay, it's a no-brainer that paying directly for content is a good parameter for determining influence over third-party content. Even ads placed alongside content can be seen to influence that content. But I also believe that non-monetary gifts, such as wining and dining or inviting bloggers to events or hiring bloggers as consultants, can influence content. Again, that may be of more interest to the FTC than the FDA. Independence and influence are on opposite sides of the same coin. The vast majority of survey respondents believe that directly paying someone to post discussions on social media sites such as Twitter means that the content is not independent. But I also asked about grants versus ads. Respondents did not feel that there was much difference between sponsoring discussions by paid ads or through independent grants. Patient communities and the public health, however, can benefit from sponsorship. For that, independent grants are preferable to paid ads. As pointed out in the 1996 hearing, however, independent grants may be an oxymoron. Grants may not be renewed if the grantee does not live up to expectations, even if those expectations are not voiced by the grantor. Are there different considerations that should be weighed depending upon the specific social media platform that is used or based on the intended audience? Well, the respondents frequently mention, of course, space limitations, and I think Pharma and other presenters have talked about that, but I might have a little bit more to say about that in a few minutes. Other considerations that were frequently mentioned were patients versus healthcare providers as the audience, marketing versus disease awareness types of communications, user-generated content versus pharma-generated content, and children versus adults. Respondents most often have seen unauthorized content on sites such as the following: YouTube, Wikipedia, Twitter, blogs, discussion groups, and Google SideWiki. I just want to say something about SideWiki, which you know is a good example of how quickly technology can change and how difficult it is for regulatory authorities to adapt to that change. And as you know, SideWiki allows anyone to attach comments to any web page. Recently, I posted a SideWiki comment about a possible adverse event on Viagra.com. Sorry, advisor, you're number one, so we have to pick you. Okay. By the way, I shared my SideWiki comments with my Twitter and Facebook friends, and it quickly spread throughout the Internet. You can search Google right now, and you'll see it's the number one result under the ad for Viagra. So is Google in the audience? I hope so. Some people think that SideWiki is a game changer. I really think it's a public health nuisance, if not worse. Pharma companies should demand that Google provide them and other healthcare companies with an option to block SideWiki on their entire site with one simple registration of a URL. Google, tear down this SideWiki. Let's move on to some regulatory issues. What I've learned regarding fair balance, for example, is that media agnostic regulations are not popular among industry experts. Also, the one-click rule is desired by the industry. However, most often it takes 2 clicks to reach the approved labeling. I just want to point that out. There are some good ideas for dealing with space limitations. As I mentioned, people want the one-click rule. It's not that they prefer 2 clicks. But the problem is not the number of clicks. It's what happens when you get to the information. And if you're just going to the package insert, everybody realizes that this is virtually unreadable by the general public. And so it seems to me that you can use the Internet to better purpose than just driving people to the package insert.